I've been in the field for 25 years, and I feel that the ITR model is one of the best tools in my toolbox.
The Instinctual Trauma Response Model has become so much a part of what I do. I can't imagine doing it any other way.
I actually started using the ITR model after the tragic events of 9/11.
We had the big chart patients. We had patients that were considered dissociative, psychotic, crazy, borderline, self-injurious, and all that. There's something about this technique that makes people feel very safe from day one.
Very big difference. Very big difference. You go from a scared kid to a happy kid.
So many clients that we see in different populations have a foundation of trauma experience in their lives.
And as a therapist, if you can realize that the people are more than just a cluster of symptoms, and you start relating to them and connecting to them in terms of what happened to them, well, that changes the playing field.
Helping the clients understand that their responses to trauma, abnormal situations, are actually normal.
I think what is effective about this model is it incorporates a lot of stuff that's been around for a long time. Right? People have been telling their stories forever. This model focuses on how you tell your story.
Because it combines the left hemisphere words with the right hemisphere images and body responses.
It's that the memory hasn't been processed correctly. And the right brain doesn't have a sense of time. The right brain doesn't have a sense of sequence. So when the memory comes back, if it's in the right brain, well, guess what? It's all over the place.
And those fragments keep on swirling around in the right brain, so there wasn't an end. There wasn't an end.
There must be a narrative that's told that has a beginning and middle and end. So the victim is no longer re-experiencing the trauma.
Once we start working in the right part of the brain, you will remember. That's where the material is. So with the instinctual trauma response, I find I get a better result than with just traditional talk therapy. It incorporates the story and then the distortions that arise from the story. And many times therapists will try to address the distortions before they address the narrative, or they'll try to do relaxation before they address the narrative.
The approach that I use in domestic violence is to have the client identify what is the most distressing trauma to them, but we always go back and look at the preverbal traumas as well. And without looking at that piece, we find that I often don't see the resolution of symptoms.
And what I find is with the instinctual trauma response, I may be working on a more recent trauma, but all of a sudden people want to go back and talk about their earlier traumas. So it's not just the model itself is working with one trauma. It tends to bring people back to an earlier state. And so you'll have a soldier who'll be working on a combat trauma. And all of a sudden they'll start to talk about what happened to them when they were a kid.
I am aware of and have been trained in other models, and I think what's really important is that there are commonalities as well as differences in their approach. So it's kind of what is becoming the gold standard in trauma treatment is really the narrative process.
And it gets people access to memories in a way that doesn't overwhelm them. And that's key. The other thing is it incorporates a lot of what we call cognitive behavioral theory.
And so I believe by going through the stages of the narrative, you're addressing a neurobiological approach and helping them process the fragments of their trauma in a way that makes them able to cope and not experience it.
You know, you're making a movie of your life. Look, and if they resist, well, look at a storyboard. You know, this is what this is like. This is the storyboard of what happened to you.
It puts together those feelings and fragments that are stuck in the right brain, gives it to the left brain in a way that it can be understood, and that's integrated. Understood and thus accepted by the left brain as a something with a beginning and a middle and an end.
But what is so unique about Dr. Tinnin and Dr. Gantt's model is that they really identify the stages that, as we say, are instinctual in trauma response. And although I've seen clients have this information for the very first time, I've never worked with a client that doesn't relate with the stages.
Okay, so if you just told the story, in fact, you probably would not get too many of the body functions because that's not normally what we think of. So, but it's real important to have them there because that's what triggers kids. They get that, and then their body starts, heartbeat goes up, blood pressure goes up, and they're off to the races. Once you have that integrated in a story, that should be able to say, oh yeah, it's over. It's over. I don't have to do that anymore.
If you take people through the stages of the story, yeah, there are going to be parts that are hard. Okay? When somebody tells you that they had to shoot a kid or they were held at gunpoint and raped, they're not going to have a pleasant experience. They're not going to, they're not going to say, oh yes, this was easy. But they'll be able to get to the end of it. And that's the crucial difference. They will get to the end of the story and realize they survived it through this model.
You can incorporate play and the child's imagination to help them process the events that have happened to them while also sticking to the framework of the ITR.
It's a balance between fluidity and structure.
There's puppets. There's all kinds of ways to tell a story. And 3-year-olds like puppets.
The instinctual trauma response is the riverbed, and the trauma is the river. A river without a riverbed, you get flood. But if you have that riverbed, it has a place to go.
I think the ITR model is such a user-friendly model that it's not just applicable to the art therapist. I think any mental health professional that is trauma-informed could easily use this method to help their clients process traumas